So, I have said multiple times in a couple of my videos, I really think at the end of this year, we are going to see the government release something. And I think it will be something in the way that we've seen already of the government's fantastic way that the, quote, 3 successful businesses that were flourishing because of Brexit. And of course, as we had a closer look at them, and as many other people had a closer look at these businesses, the reality was that these businesses were not flourishing as successfully as the government would like to say they are. And I highly suspect at the end of this year, we will get some sort of document, maybe a paper of some sort. It could be like something we got with the 3 business success stories of Brexit that they put out in a similar way to essentially say, oh my god, first year of Brexit, hasn't it been so wonderful? Look at all the, quote, successes we have had. And of course, as I have said, if they do that, that is going to be absolutely fantastic and is going to get absolutely ripped to shreds. Now, of course, we are very quickly and fastly approaching the sometimes what in political terms is, quote, the hallowed 100 days. And the 100 days mark, it's more an American thing than it really is a UK thing, but it's often cited as this is how, like, the rest of the presidency or the rest of this leader's tenure is going to be. So, like, the first 100 days, really important. It sets the pace and the standards of essentially how things are going to go. And of course, we are, if not of already, or of past that first 100 days, I think, mark at the moment. So how does this relate then to Brexit in its first 100 days? So today we're going to go over an article from the Yorkshire Bylines. However, it only goes up to the first 90 days, but only 10 days behind. So, however, that was published on the 1st of April, so obviously a bit later. So we may have even passed that 100 days mark by the time this video comes out. So before we do jump into that article, please do remember to hit that like and share button. And of course, down below, there is links to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, well, buy me a coffee. And thank you to all those people who do support me that way. So, on with the article. So, as we said, this comes from the Yorkshire Bylines, and the title is Brexit and Trade, the Story So Far. Just before 10 a.m. on December 30th, 2020 was drawing a welcome close. Boris Johnson rose from the thinly populated green leather benches of the House of Commons and launched the second reading of the EU Future Relationship Bill implementing the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, or the TCA, into UK law. He opened by proudly telling MPs that the TCA should, quote, allow companies to do even more business with our European friends, and British exporters will not face a sudden thicket of trade barriers. Of course, we all know, if you've been keeping up with any of the Brexit shenanigans, or just even briefly talked about Brexit, or even kept up, or maybe if you've been following your trade magazines, because there's been so many stories recently in trade magazines about the problems that Brexit has caused. So maybe you know or are fully aware of just the reality of how wrong Boris Johnson's statement was there. So, a month later, exports to the EU had suffered its largest drop since records began, plummeting by a calamitous 40% as exporters ran headlong into permanent and sudden thicket of trade barriers Johnson had explicitly said that they wouldn't face, and exports to Ireland fell by about 65%. UK importers, meanwhile, have escaped the worst and are yet to navigate a smaller wall of new paperwork for goods coming the other way, after the phased introduction of border checks scheduled to begin this month. And it was delayed until January next year because the infrastructure wasn't ready. Despite this reprieve, however, imports have still dropped by a massive 29%, and trade with the EU is slowly collapsing, even as a campaign of sponsored ads run by the government attempts to present Brexit as a runaway success. So, Brexit and financial services. On Monday the 4th of January, the first post-Brexit trading day, the president of Kobo, a pan-European equities exchange platform, was shocked to see that 1.5 trillion per year, not a typo, of EU share dealing shifted seamlessly away from London into Europe, mainly to Holland. By the end of January, Amsterdam had displaced London in share trading volume for the first time in modern history, with a 300% increase into an average of 9.2 billion a day compared to London's 8.6 billion. The city was no longer the main location for European share dealing. And within days, trading of euro-dominated derivatives swapped in London and dropped nearly 40% of the market last July to 10% in January, according to a survey published by data provider HIS Market, and in early February, reported by the Financial Times, European platform shares rose by 25%. So that's just the financial services, and that is going to get worse, probably. So, Brexit and fishing. From Peterhead to Brixham, fishing communities woke up in January to find that they could not only a mass of red tape blocking their path to traditional markets in Europe, but some products, notably LBMs, the live mollusks, could not be exported at all due to pre-existing rules that the UK had helped to draft. For many companies, including some who had actively campaigned for it, Brexit has proved to be an existential threat. Ian Perkins, a Brexit fish merchant, gave an interview to the Bylines TV and admitted that Brexit had brought his company to its knees almost overnight. He said, "If I could turn back the clock, I would not have voted leave. Of course not," he said. I think me and many others have made a mistake." While Whitby Crews told the Yorkshire Post they will be worse off after Brexit. So what's happened with our food and drink industry as well? The Food and Drink Federation, in a snapshot of the UK-EU food and drink trade for January, revealed that exports of food to the EU had fallen by 75%. COVID and pre-Christmas stockpiling were contributing factors, but much was blamed on the new non-tariff barriers faced by UK exporters and the collapse of groupage movements, which has shut out many small to medium enterprise firms. The cheesemaker from Cheshire has lost over 20% of his business overnight, as EU rules require a £180 health certificate to be provided on orders to EU customers for gifts of his award-winning wax-wrapped cheese worth about £25 or £30. His online retail operation is now at risk after basically coming to a dead stop. Shane Brennan, the chief executive of the Cold Chain Federation, has claimed the UK food chain will be slower, more complex and more expensive for months, if not years. So what about the chemical industry? This is another area. Business leaders in the chemical industries wrote to ministers back in February with concerns that a new system of chemical regulation will hit the UK industry hard across a range of manufacturing sectors. Plans to introduce a UK version of REACH, the EU system for registering chemicals, is set to cost the industry £1 billion, as reported by the Financial Times. Perversely, this cost to the industry for compliance for one jurisdiction will double to £500 million. The UK companies have already spent over the past decade in complying with the EU REACH, and it is now 27 markets the leaders' letters said. So what about small businesses? And ultimately, it is really small businesses who exported and found that their companies grew because of Brexit are really who are going to get hurt the most. So how have they been faring? So the Director of Trade and Facilitation at the British Chamber of Commerce, Liam Smith, suggested that the extra time and cost of EU trade had resulted in an exodus of British businesses from the market, which he feared would increase as time goes on. Mr. Smythe told the International Trade Committee that businesses face an existential problem with the TCA. Fergus McReynolds, Director of EU Affairs at Make UK, said that the level of disruption had exceeded his expectations, with a poll suggesting that the majority of companies were experiencing increased costs and difficulties. 9 out of 10 companies polled said that their costs had been increased by Brexit, with 60% of those who said that they were already citing disruption, Mr. Reynolds told the committee. So, what about logistics? Because this is another area that we are having extreme problems in. And we are now seeing that some UK logistic companies are basically just refusing to go to Europe altogether, which is causing even more problems. So Brexit had driven what was called a warehouse boom in Holland and other EU member states in the run-up to the end of the transition period, as British companies sought to avoid delays and reduce the cost of cross-border trade. The Digby-Jones Index records dozens of British and foreign firms, including names like JD Sports, Designers Guild, and bike maker Geocycle, moving operations. The UK businesses who moved to Holland in 2020 alone are expected to create over 6,000 jobs there. So that's 6,000 jobs gone from the UK. So what about farming? And I've said wait until the end of the year, because as this year goes on, we are going to start to see the farmers really get up and really get angry. And trust me, the farming and farming communities are a core of the Tory base. So this is going to have huge implications, not only for food and farming in the UK, but also politically on the Conservatives. So exporters to meat of the EU will soon face the same problems as fish merchants, with costly and cumbersome health customs and health checks and cancelled orders, and have their meat having to be destroyed before reaching the continent. Alan Swedbank, the Erasmus Professor of Agricultural Economics at Reading University, has suggested that farmers will be squeezed very heavily. He claimed that apart from being unable to compete on price, farmers will lose out from the loss of direct payments that they used to receive under the EU's Common Agricultural Policy. The new DEFRA systems, such as the Environmental Land Management Scheme, may provide some income, but Swinbank cast doubt over whether all farms will be able to make up for the overall loss. Farmers who in the past had recruited seasonal workers from the EU will now wrestle with the intricacies of trying to pilot the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Scheme, while others fear the risk of a return to modern-day slavery, as large debts and limited rights leave seasonal agricultural workers vulnerable to forced labour in Britain. So what about the fashion industry? Britain's $35 billion fashion and textile sector, which employs 1 million people, is facing decimation after the deal with the EU left a gaping hole where promised free movement of goods and services for all creative, including the fashions and textile sector, should be. In an open letter to the members of the Fashion Roundtable, a leading think tank for the fashion industry, signed by industry leaders, said that Brexit red tape and delays and extra costs were impacting the industry already, with work relocating to the EU, all impacting their opportunities to travel and trade as well. So, as you can see here, this has been already absolute disaster in terms of trade. And remember, trade was like the big thing the Brexiteers loved to talk about. But of course, when it came to actually talking about the realities of it, it's not happened. And we are starting to see, just as we've seen before, the complete abdication of responsibility by the Brexiteers. They expect someone else to sort out their mess. Mainly, I might add, the experts who they spent 2 years, if not longer than that, trashing and saying that they did not need experts, and to quote Michael Gove, that people had had enough of experts. Well, only think to what Tony Blair said just not long after that had been said, that he said in response to Michael Gove, sooner or later you are going to need those experts. And as we have said before, a lot of those experts are basically going to say, if you want to solve this problem, just rejoin the single market and customs union. And they are not going to like that, because sooner or later the calls to rejoin those two things are going to become very, very deafening. So, as always, thanks for watching. Please do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And of course, thank you to everyone who contributes to my Patreon page and, of course, buys me a coffee. Thank you very much for your support on that. And as always, we'll see you all next time.